This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. We end today's show in Colombia, where the right-wing Trump-backed candidate, Abelardo de la Espriella, has clinched a narrow victory in Sunday's runoff presidential election, defeating the leftist Senator Iván Cepeda. An initial ballot count shows de la Espriella received about 49.7% of the vote, while Cepeda, who's an ally of current Colombian President Gustavo Petro, trailed by only some 250,000 votes at 48.7%. The results must still be verified with a final review of the ballots. Thousands of people reportedly took to the streets of Bogota and Cali Sunday night, some denouncing U.S. meddling in the election. Cepeda spoke last night, called on Colombia election officials to scrutinize the initial results during the ballot verification process. He had this message for his supporters.
Nuestro más sincero,
we extend our most sincere, profound, and heartfelt appreciation and gratitude to the 12.7 million Colombians whose support at the polls reinforces our conviction that profound democratic social change in Colombian society is entirely possible.
Iván Cepeda is a prominent human rights defender who'd vowed to continue Petro's progressive agenda and to negotiate peace with Colombia's armed groups. His father was assassinated by right-wing U.S.-backed paramilitary groups in 1994. In contrast, de la Espriella is a millionaire businessman and lawyer who ran a fear-mongering, tough-on-crime campaigns, promised to build mega prisons inspired by El Salvador's authoritarian President Nayib Bukele, to bomb narco-terrorist camps, quote-unquote, and to abandon Petro's peace efforts. De la Espriella's reported victory is also a win for U.S. President Trump and his administration, as his administration intervenes across Latin America, waging an intensifying so-called war on drugs, in which even Colombia's current President Petro has been a target of after he faced false accusations and threats from Trump. Following news of de la Espriella's victory, Trump wrote on social media, "He won big," unquote. Despite threatening to, quote, disembowel the left throughout his campaign, de la Espriella shifted his tone last night while speaking in Colombia.
Voy a gobernar para todos.
I will govern for all Colombians, for those who voted for me and for those who chose another candidate. There will be no winners or losers. There will be no reprisals, no persecution, because in a democracy, there are no irreconcilable enemies. There are compatriots who think differently.
De la Espriella refers to himself as the Tiger. He's a lawyer and political newcomer. For more, we go to Cali, Colombia, where we're joined by Manuel Rozental, longtime Colombian physician and activist. He's been exiled several times for his political activities. Dr. Rozental is part of the group Pueblos en Camino, or People on the Path. Manuel, protests have taken place in Cali. Please describe what's happening on the ground and how Colombians are responding to the election news.
Well, thank you, Amy. Now, the situation is tense, but it's also calm. And it's calm because of the speech, part of which you presented, of Iván Cepeda last night, calling for calm and for... so there were some peaceful mobilizations yesterday, but the situation is tense, has been very tense, but it's calm now, and we have to see what happens. Of course, most of us, me included, feel a tremendous hangover after this result. But let me tell you, after your introduction, what this election is about and was about, and it's beyond Colombia, it's from Colombia. Two projects that are playing, confronting themselves through the electoral process from Colombia, but not only in Colombia. One represented by Iván Cepeda, social reforms, human rights, progressive government, justice, and the fight against corruption and crime and for peace. The most decent candidate you can find with a transparent trajectory. On the other hand, de la Espriella clearly represents a criminal approach to politics, lying, propaganda, coordination and collusion with criminal narco-trafficking, restriction of rights, and money laundering. and how these two projects confront each other electorally, and how the criminal project is winning. The context of this, of course, is what you mentioned, a link between local to regional to national mafias, where drug trafficking, legal and illegal control of territories and resources are producing wealth and transferring it to the north. That in coordination with the Monroe Doctrine, the Shield of the Americas, and the US project linked to drug trafficking with the pretext of attacking it while bombing boats in the Caribbean and so on. So this project is now labeled as an outsider project. It's a mafia-type project, criminal project from the ground up, taking over a new state and then defeating a progressive, institutional, state-based democratic process.
Manuel, we just have less than a minute. What does this mean for the peace process?
It's a horrendous perspective. We expect to have military operations and a US intervention within the country. We expect to have human rights abuses. We expect to have militarization, and it's all for the extraction of resources and the link of drug trafficking to the US government, US interests, and global mafias.
Can you talk about who de Espriella is? Give us more on his background.
Well, de Espriella is a lawyer. In fact, he runs a law firm from Miami in Florida, but he cannot practice law legally in Florida, but he has a law firm there.
He's a U.S. citizen as well as Colombian and lived in Florida, in Miami for years?
Absolutely. He's a U.S. citizen. He claims to be a Republican, and he claims allegiance to the United States and to the Republican Party. And he has very close links to, he says, and they're shown to Secretary of State Marco Rubio and to Ohio Republican Congressman Bernie Moreno, amongst others. So throughout the campaign, it was always an issue amongst lawyers and constitutional lawyers in Colombia whether he could actually be a presidential candidate and president when he has to abide by his loyalty to the United States government. He became a millionaire by representing paramilitaries, drug traffickers, Alex Saab, the famous Colombian who was part of Maduro's government in all kinds of corrupt businesses and others. And that's how he made his money. And whenever he's been challenged to show the source of his money, he backs off and disappears. And he's actually someone who uses legal threats and legal suits against anyone that challenges him or criticizes him, including 109 journalists whom he labels activists disguised as journalists, including one Colombian seeking asylum and living in Phoenix, Arizona for 10 years, Beto Corral, whom in coordination and by direct order of Marco Rubio is now jailed, and we don't know where he is in the United States, and he's being denied his right to legal defense because he criticized de Espriella. And one more thing is de Espriella, there are several legal lawsuits against de Espriella for criminal charges, including paramilitary involvement, money laundering, drug trafficking, etc. With all this known, he became a presidential candidate with the support of the United States government.
That's what I want to ask you about. Can you talk about President Trump's endorsement of de Espriella and talk about what you think the role is of the Trump administration, not to mention Marco Rubio, in this election?
Actually, the easiest way to answer this is to ask what the De las Espriella's role will be in the U.S. administration of Colombia. In fact, De las Espriella appeared and is supported. He supports Israel. He promises to do exactly the same as Milei is doing in Argentina, Bukele is doing in El Salvador, the war on drugs, emulating and repeating President Trump's directives. So, in fact, De las Espriella is more of a Republican representative of the Trump administration that will now rule Colombia. He promises more, he lies, he fabricates stories, and he uses legal action against many, and he has become wealthy, not unlike President Trump, by doing all these things.
And let me ask you to follow up on your point about him going after people who criticize him. A Colombian activist living here in the United States who was seeking political asylum was detained by ICE last week for his criticism of De la Espriella, immediately following a memo issued by Secretary of State Marco Rubio claiming that Beto Corral was interfering in U.S. policy. Petro's demanded his release. What is known about this man's whereabouts?
Well, he was captured in Phoenix, as you say, and in fact, the sequence was first De la Espriella, 9 hours before he was captured, announced that something was going to happen, pointing in this direction, because he was criticized. One has to underscore the fact that Corral did not criticize anyone in the U.S. He did not criticize the government. There's no wrongdoing against anything in the U.S. He became involved in the political campaign in Colombia from the U.S. as a blogger, which he's very well known as, and he criticized De la Espriella. So De la Espriella announces 9 hours prior that something's going to happen. Then Marco Rubio writes an order to have him captured. 4 agents capture him. There are images of this. Then he goes from Phoenix to a low-security jail in Phoenix, then to El Paso, then to Minnesota, and then somewhere else, in order for him not to have access to legal representation, because in the federal system in the U.S., lawyers from one state cannot act in another state. And this was all orchestrated from the highest officials in the U.S. administration for and with De la Espriella. And also, Bernie Moreno wrote a note, a tweet that was made public, in which he addressed the journalist Corral, stating that he was not allowed to support or criticize a friend of the United States in the United States, and that he will pay for it.
Yes, I mean, the quote from Marco Rubio was, allowing Corral to remain in the U.S. undermines U.S. foreign policy interests in Colombia's democratic processes and signals that foreign nationals may use U.S. platforms to conduct politically motivated disinformation campaigns and litigation targeting foreign democratic actors without consequence. Manuel Rozental.
That's correct. And the statement shows what's happening. In fact, those disinforming, manipulating, lying, accuse the ones that present truths, facts, evidence. If there is anyone that is actually undergoing investigations for criminal activities, is De la Espriella. But not Beto Corral, but Beto Corral can actually be sent to jail by the Secretary of State of the U.S. for crimes he didn't commit. The criminals are now attacking the victim.
Can you talk about what this means for Gustavo Petro? Was this a referendum on his presidency?
Well, if it was a referendum on his presidency, he won it. no president in the history of Colombia has had as much support leaving a government as he does. Most people in Colombia love Gustavo Petro. That's number one. Number two is more than 12 million votes for a leftist candidate in Colombia is unprecedented, unthought of. It's at least 1 million more votes than led Gustavo Petro to the presidency. So in fact, this is not that. It's actually the same as a global confrontation through the electoral systems between manipulation, fear-mongering, lying, threatening, propaganda on the one side, criminal with a lot of money behind them, and on the other side, decency, respect for nature, respect for human rights, and a clean career being labeled as criminal. And we can see once again who's winning. So we knew whether Iván Cepeda won or lost, we knew what we have to do is face this confrontation through but beyond the electoral system, and it's what's happening everywhere.
Dr. Manuel Rozental is a longtime Colombian physician and activist, has gone into exile several times for his political activities. He's part of the group Pueblos en Camino, or People on the Path. To see part one of our discussion, go to democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.